Hello and welcome to episode 192 of Drink the Movies. I'm Brian here, as always, with Michaela. And Michaela, this week it's Veterans Day here in the United States. So I want to send a special thanks to all the veterans out there. And one of the veteran programs here that we have is the USO shows, right? It's going way back in the day. And today we're going to be taking a look at a movie that explores the dynamic relationship between Bette Midler and James Caan as they go to, support the troops and I don't know, a bunch of other stuff happens in there for sure. This is one of your favorites from your childhood. We'll see if it's still one of your favorites for today. But today we're talking about For the Boys.
We are talking about For the Boys. And uh, it's interesting because this movie came out and I was real young. We talked about this. I watched all the movies you probably shouldn't watch. I was like 10 when I first saw this film,
Hmm.
and it quickly became like my favorite movie for like a year. I mean, my poor dad was like, "Are we watching this again?" I mean, every day after school. It's really
Yeah, I was.
long. It's really long. I didn't realize how long it is. It's like 2 hours, 25 minutes. Brian was very quick to let me know that I
Hmm.
just pick all my favorite movies are like 2.5 hours long. But I would watch like a little before school. I'd watch a little bit after school. I'd watch a little bit of it before bed. Like Bette Midler was my spirit animal as a child. Like I just wanted to be every character she'd ever played. And Dixie Leonard is no different for me.
Okay, well, there you go. Maybe you can do some singing and dancing here as we make our way through this movie. So, Michaela, let's do this. We're going to need to take a quick break so we can get a cocktail going, like maybe a couple cocktails, because this is a long, lengthy movie. Although not a lot happens in it. We'll get into that. But for sure. So let's go ahead and take a quick break. We'll grab some lavender syrup, and we'll be right back to mix up this week's drink.
So, Brian, as we move into like Veterans Day week, because Veterans Day was on Monday, thank you very much, as we've said, to all of the veterans. I tried to find a cocktail that kind of paid homage to some of the awards. This presidential award thing that happens in the movie is not a real thing. I think it was supposed to be it was supposed to resemble like that I don't know, life achievement award that sometimes the president gives out, but it's not real.
Hmm.
So I wanted
Yep.
to pay homage to something that was real. So we're doing a Purple Heart. It's from the Atelier Set Saveur. That sounds a lot different than it looks because
It's
it's French.
it's
So we're
French. It's French for a workshop of flavors is what
yes.
is what that is French up. The Purple Heart is also mentioned in the film in there, so it is a good cocktail, obviously to honor our veterans out there, but does tie into the movie as well. You made one of these up, sent me the picture of it. I said that looks dang delicious. Can't wait to make up my own. And yeah, it was a good time mixing this one up. So Michaela, why don't you put one of these together for everyone?
All right. So in a shaker tin, you are going to put no ice because we are going to do a dry shake, which that's right, people. We're doing another egg white drink, and that makes me so happy because I love these lately. But what we're going to do,
Hmm.
we're going to take a shaker tin that's nice and clean with no ice. We're going to add half an ounce of lemon juice, half an ounce of lavender syrup, one egg white, 1 ounce of violet gin. That is a brand of gin, as well as a flavor of gin.
Hmm.
It I chose the brand because I think I wanted the lavender to stay really nice and delicate. And then you're going to add 2 ounces of grapefruit slash white cranberry juice. Now, if you can't find that, you can just do an ounce of grape juice and an ounce of white cranberry juice, and that'll be just fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not find the Violet gin at my local liquor store myself, so I ended up using gin from Bar Hill, which has some nice honey notes. I thought that would be excellent to that. But if use the violets if you have it, and you're going to get some, kind of those springy floral notes, obviously, from the gin, of course, too. But also that lavender syrup, which you can make or you can buy. I bought mine just at the grocery store. I got some of that there in the cocktail section, or you can make it up. It's pretty simple. Just make up a regular simple syrup, and you're going to throw in just some lavender tea. Now, the more like 100% lavender you can get, the better. But if it's a mix of, lavender and other teas, that's still going to be fine. It's still going to be delicious. And, just make that, steep that with the tea a little bit, and then you can bottle it up, use it in any, cocktail like you would use any other simple syrup. It's just going to give it a little springy essence. As Michaela said, you do a drag shake, you add some ice, you shake it again, you pour it out. It gets this beautiful foamy layer on top.
Ooh.
It's kind of this really luscious, like purplish hue to it. It's very pretty. It's very nice. And you sip and enjoy this. I really like this. I love the flavor of grapefruits. It's very kind of astringent, which is a flavor that I like, but the white cranberry is sweet enough that it cuts into that a little bit. This is very soft. It's very delicate. It kind of looks like a lavender, like liquefied
Mm.
into a glass. And that's what it tastes like. This is really good. I don't know that I would drink like a bunch of these, but this seems like something you go out to like a fancy like Italian restaurant or like a fancy like steakhouse or something, and you get like like your first cocktail, right? Like you're waiting at the bar to get seated, and you get one of these, and it's delicate and beautiful. It feels very grown up and sophisticated, Michaela.
Yes, yes, all the things, all those things are true. I love this. So I've made a few in the last couple days. It took a few to get through for the boys.
I made 11 for the movie. On a side
Oh,
note.
stop. Oh my gosh. Well, we need to change this from drink the movies to making Brian watch movies he hates. That's what that's what the new title should be. But
It just
anyway,
puts a different spin on Drink the Movies,
to
really,
be
is what it
fair,
is.
yeah, he didn't hate the cocktail, people. He didn't hate the cocktail. So I know what I'm doing at least somewhat of the time. Give it a shot. Now, if you can't find the Violet Gin, because I was able to find it, but another thing that you might want to check out is the Hendrix. Hendrix is not just
Hmm.
for cucumber lovers anymore. There are tons of their cabinet of curiosities, kind of gin inventory that they have. And the one that they recommend is the Midsummer Solstice or the Grand Cabaret. Both of them are in these really beautiful, like purple bottles. The gin is
Yep.
not purple, so it's not going to change the look of the cocktail at all. But it's going to have kind of that just a different kind of herbaceousness that you might enjoy as well. So those are always options. Anytime we call for a specific gin, you don't necessarily have to go buy it. You can always use the Google and find something that's in your repertoire, in your closet, that'll do just fine, almost
Ab-
guaranteed.
Absolutely. So go ahead and mix one of those up. Let us know what you think about it. Send us pictures, all that good stuff. But for now, Michaela, I'm going to go grab my shaker tin. I'm going to grab my gin. I'm going to mix up 3 or 4 of these, and we're going to be right back to chat about this week's film for the boys.
They did it for the laughter. They did it for the tears. But most of all, they did it for the boys.
Come on, sweetheart, sing!
Well, if you feel that way about it.
Spoiler warning for the boys. You've probably not seen this movie because not very many people did. It didn't stop it from actually being pretty good, in my opinion. But if you're going to watch it, do me a favor. Go make yourself a Purple Heart. Go carve out 2.5 hours of your time. You're going to have to go rent this because it's not streaming anywhere as of Veterans Day 2024. So I'm sorry. But it's like $4. I really do think it's worth it. Yeah, go watch it, come back, and we're going to chat about all the things, including Bette Midler singing amazingly.
Yeah, not only did I have to watch this, I also had to pay $4 for it. So thanks a lot for that, Michaela. So this was released in 1991. It was directed by Mark Rydell, and it stars Bette Midler and James Caan as Dixie Leonard and Eddie Sparks, the most dynamic duo of them all for sure. You also get George Segal in there as Art Silver, who is the joke writer who goes along on this journey with this dynamic duo. So, Michaela, this was nominated for 1 Oscar. It was nominated Best Actress for Bette Midler. So, a good job there. She lost because Clarice Starling was also that year. Also, Thelma and Louise were that year. So maybe they're just rounding it out. Just throw anyone in there in the pool. I don't know for sure. But Bette Midler does a pretty fine job. And I was watching this movie, and we'll talk about kind of through the movie and kind of our thoughts as we're going through there. But this had all of the markings. Like I forget who the studio was that did this here, 20th Century Fox. This felt very much like one of those movies that gets made in order to win Oscars, right? You had Mark Rydell, who had been nominated for an Oscar or won an Oscar, I don't remember, for On Golden Pond. Had Bette Midler, who was like as popular as like I don't know, like adult contemporary like musicians, like I
For
guess like
sure.
divas, I guess of that time. You had
Yep.
James Caan, who was very popular within Hollywood, and this movie was very long. So it felt to me like they're like in a boardroom somewhere saying, "What can we do to win Oscars? Let's do this movie." And that's how this came to be. At least that's how it felt to me.
Well, um, yes. It is kind of interesting. So Bette Midler and Mark Rydell came together the first time, I believe, for The Rose, which was a huge hit. It did a lot of things for both of their careers. And so it sort of seemed to me like this was a brighter. I mean, it's tough because it's talking about three very different wars, but it was just a kind of a brighter uh, coming together of those two forces. Um, James Caan, he is mostly well known for
Well, so James Caan was
the
in The Godfather, of
Godfather.
course,
Oh my God.
as everyone knows. He was in Misery in 1990, which was just before that, and highly thought of in that. Obviously, of course,
Yeah.
and yeah,
But this,
he was basically famous for being James Caan. So.
yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think that this was like the last musical sort of thing that Bette Midler really ever did that was more than one song per movie, right? Like she is this powerhouse of acting, musical commentary. She does a lot of like in Big Business, she did a couple of different musical numbers. She in Beaches, she did a bunch of musical numbers. She does something in Hocus Pocus, which is a couple of years later. But this was kind of it. This was the last one where, like, I don't know, there were 6 times where she broke into song, and so it's kind of a musical, but not really a musical. And that really appealed to my 9, 10-year-old self. I don't know how it it obviously didn't translate well to Brian as a
Yeah.
43-year-old man.
Well,
But
and I think it hinged on the kind of that fact, and that was, I guess, something that was kind of popular at the time, right? So you had Dick Tracy, which we talked about here on the show before, which kind of had like this, companion album from Madonna. You had Batman in 1989, which had kind of this companion album from Prince, and I think they were kind of hedging their bets that Bette Midler could sell a lot of records from this, and that was not the case. The soundtrack did not perform particularly well. They kind of expected it to do gangbusters as well as the film, and it never did. So maybe that was kind of the death knell for things like that. I don't know. That seems like a very like kind of like locked in time. Although we just had Lady Gaga do the same with Joker, which apparently also tanked. So I guess reviving things that were dead and gone was for a reason there. So let's talk about the movie a little bit, Michaela, and then we can get into kind of some of our overall sweeping thoughts of this epic 2.5 hour long film. So the movie gets started off. We get this young jokester kid. He's in like a limousine. He's riding there, and his job is to go pick up Dixie Leonard, right? She has committed to being on this TV program or this broadcasted thing, right? And she's supposed to get picked up. She has to be at the studio by like 6 p.m. So you got this younger guy there. He's in the limo. He is on the way to Dixie Leonard's house. He pulls up. He asks the gardener where Dixie Leonard lives. He knows, of course. He points this young man to her home. This is my favorite part of the movie right there because he knocks. She doesn't answer, so he just breaks into her house straight away, 1 minute into the movie, just busting in to get Dixie Leonard ready for the show.
But what she does is we get to see what 90-year-old or 80-year-old Dixie Leonard's house looks like, right? He has kind of a wander and a gander, and yeah, I mean, I do think that this mechanism, this was not probably a good choice. I know why they had to do it because they wanted to be able to have this montage of all of the art that she had and the pictures that she had and the paraphernalia of her like world and like things that she had kept over the course of her career. And they wanted to show that in such a way to have him being looking at all this stuff and then her kind of show up and be like, what are you doing here? But don't break into someone's house. I mean, I don't care that she's 80 years old. That's not a good idea. And also, you're in LA in the 90s. Why are you not locking your door?
Lock your door.
I don't know. Just
that's
pointing
why
that out there.
we were just in LA and everyone has like a gate in front of their house. Maybe that's why. Yeah.
Yeah.
This guy
like,
is coming
we
in.
got Ari.
Also later in the film, I'll say it right now, so don't forget. He also later in the film tries to break into her bedroom, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. So,
Yeah.
I do like this is probably my favorite part of the movie is the way that it's structured. It's kind of like this like kind of like faux like narration kind of thing, similar to like Forrest Gump, right? Not to compare those two films in any sort of way at all, but she is there to tell us a story about going through, her musical journey with Eddie Sparks. Right.
Yeah.
She's talking about it. She's like, I'm not going to that show with that knucklehead. I hate him. I've hated him for like every minute of the last 50 years, basically, is what she says. Bette Midler has some terrible makeup that's only to be outdone by some makeup later in the film, but she gets into the story about her and Eddie and kind of how they met, right? She was like a singer, performer kind of thing at just like some local clubs, it seemed like, right? Kind of some like smaller circuit type of stuff there. But then, someone that she knows there, Art Silver, played by George Segal, is going to recommend her to go and be the other half to this kind of like comedy singing routine kind of thing, with Eddie Sparks. So she is going to hop a plane, go over to Europe, and meet good old Eddie Sparks for a little bit of a song and dance routine and see how these two hit it off.
And they hit it off pretty epically bad, I would say. I love this opening scene. She is so nervous. She's had to leave. So her husband, Dixie's husband, is off fighting the war. She has a little boy. He's like 4 or 5. His name is Danny. She had to leave him with some friends to go do this. Meanwhile, Eddie Sparks is just really arrogant, as you probably would be if you were like the Bob Hope. I mean, I think that's what they're trying to say is he can do no wrong. And he's the only reason that Dixie's even there is because somebody fell through to go on tour. And Art is Eddie's longtime pal and writer. And he's like, look, she's really good. She's going to be amazing. And Eddie's just like very nonplussed. He's like, I don't know, whatever. We'll see. He meets her. He's like, I don't think this is going to work. Like immediately. And she's got stars in her eyes. She's like so sweet. And just, kind of worships him, which I think is gross. But he's just like, I don't know. And she's wearing this really pretty dress. It gets immediately torn. She has no choice but to improvise. And she does really well. I got to say, I love Bette Midler, right? I really loved her. I always thought that I was like a little Bette Midler growing up because she's very loud. That checks. She's very, she loves to sing, also checks. And she looks amazing in this, like, it's like the British Air Force captain's jacket that she turns into kind of a dress. It is real cute. It looks amazing on her, and she comes out and he is not expecting that. They do this back and forth. She tops him, like she makes the boys that they're performing for laugh really, really well. He doesn't like it because she immediately goes to very sexualized jokes. He doesn't think that is right. He thinks that that's a cheap way to get laughs. And, as comedians, right, now apparently he's like the poet laureate of all comedy. And he doesn't like that. So he goes off stage and he has a temper tantrum and she proceeds to sing. And it's amazing. And the lights go out. And this is one of my favorite scenes because she actually gets to show her singing chops in a very different way because the generator stopped working and she does this very soft song, P.S. I Love You. And she goes out and meets all the people and like writes best wishes on like their casts and hugs them. And we actually see the very first time we ever see Vince Vaughn in the audience, which is really cool. And but
Great.
What is also happening, so Eddie Sparks throwing a temper tantrum and back, but Art Silver, his writer and her uncle is looking at this going, this is going to be amazing. They are so good together on stage. They're going to make a ton of money. And that seems to be the saving grace because Eddie doesn't want to have anything to do with her. He's really rude to her afterwards. Everybody else is telling her how great she was. And he's just like, you got a toilet for a mouth. I don't want you around me. You're done. This isn't going to work. And Art has to kind of bring them together. And what we see is that theme of Art bringing them together over and over again over the course of the 50 years that they perform together.
Yeah, absolutely. So they kind of in the show, Dixie feels very accosted by this negative criticism, even though she says she's been performing at these clubs and things for like, I don't know, like 10 years or something at this point. Like she's never gotten any sort of negative feedback in her life with this. But she takes great offense to it. So they end up going to this like restaurant bar kind of thing, I guess, where a bunch of the servicemen, probably like the like generals and lieutenants go, kind of some like officers club sort of thing. So they're going there, and Art is talking to Eddie Sparks, and Eddie Sparks is like, "No, I hate her. I don't want her here. Send her back home." And basically Art just says, "No, you'll be famous." So of course, Eddie Sparks is like, "Oh, okay then." And then he goes and has the same conversation with Dixie Leonard, and he says, "Nope, absolutely not going to perform with him. I hate that guy. Oh, you'll be famous. Oh, okay, never mind then." And then they go over. He gives the most gentle apology ever given in the history of mankind, and suddenly they're inseparable. They get up, they dance as this place is being bombed, and you're meant to buy into the fact that I don't know, like they were like had some sort of like instant chemistry. I didn't buy into that at all. If you look at any of the background, James Caan apparently talked about how he hated working on this and he hated working with Bette Midler. And that is very apparent to me because I don't buy their chemistry at all in these very few instances where they're meant to, have sort of this, kind of like spark between them. It comes off as very, very forced and very, very fast in a movie that's 2.5 hours long, to be quite honest.
Yeah. So they're still in World War II. And one of the things that I didn't pick up on as a kid that I totally did as an adult, that sort of changed my feelings for some of this is, Eddie Sparks is really just not a very good person. And that, I mean, but he had this idea, right? They're on this tour, and he has this idea to bring her husband. They found him somewhere, and they're like, "Hey, we're performing close enough to where he can show up." And he doesn't do this because he wants to make Bette Midler happy or that, Dixie happy, or any of that. He does that purely for publicity sake. And he makes sure that he has all these cameras, and he makes sure that he has all this stuff. And Dixie at this point, they're getting along better. She'll ask him if it's okay if she like changes things and works on things because he doesn't like it when she doesn't. And so that part is going well. This scene where her husband Michael shows up is really interesting to me because as a kid, I watched it and I was like, this is so tender and this is so sweet. And it is because they haven't seen each other in a year. But she like sings to him and she can carry her voice while she's crying. It's really lovely there. But Eddie Sparks only did this because he wanted to get, some shots of it. He didn't do it because he actually cared about Michael as a soldier or
right.
Dixie. And, that was one thing that, as she's talking to, Jeff, the kid who's there to pick her up, he's explaining, this is why Eddie is so awful. And this is why he's such a horrible person. Because he didn't care about any of that, but she didn't see it because she was so blinded by the personality that is him on stage. Right. And I think that is something that I wish they had delved into a little bit differently or a little more. Because the world fell in love with like the Bob Hopes and the Bing Crosbys. And it came out later for both of those people that there was a whole world that we didn't know about that was their real life. And that was the thing that they could have explained a little bit more because we saw some of that, but we didn't see how bad that really got until, we kind of had this explosive deal that happens in the second war that they go out and which is Korea. So Eddie Sparks, Dixie Leonard, they become like a household name. Eddie has this great idea to go make $1 billion.
And I do like just to go back there when they're in the Northern Africa section and Dixie Leonard's husband is there. It does kind of like immediately cut then to his her husband's funeral who died in action there. I kind of like that immediate transition. And then it kind of goes back into like, the current timeline of, Dixie, telling young Jeff there, kind of about that her husband died. And then it transitions then into kind of the next war, right? They're doing this TV section thing. But it does this really weird thing, I thought, where her son now who had lost his father in the war, and has, I guess, kind of this father figure in Eddie Sparks, but it was weird. Like I could kind of like grasp like what they were getting at, that her son would be drawn to Eddie Sparks as kind of the surrogate father figure, but they didn't do a very good job of like laying down the groundwork for that happening. So it felt really strange, like anytime like her son and Eddie were interacting, because Eddie has his own family and things. And I think, a little bit, and the film was certainly long enough. They could have, added in a line or two about, how her son was then looking up to Eddie, but it just kind of like thrusts you into that. So every time they had like an interaction of her son and Eddie, especially kind of in this first section, before they go off to the Korean War when they're trying to do this TV show, it felt so strange to me and kind of creepy and kind of awkward because they didn't do any sort of groundwork for it.
Yeah.
I understand why it might have happened, but just a little something would have been well.
Yeah, the only foreshadowing you really see is at the funeral, right? When he kind of grabs when Eddie grabs Danny's hand and picks him up and then walks down this
He asks him what girl he
hill.
wants to be with.
You're right. Oh, that's in yeah, that but yeah, one thing I would have liked to have rounded out Eddie's character just a little bit more because we find out that his wife drinks a lot. He has three daughters. They all are wearing the same clothing, which I don't know if that was like a boarding school thing or what. The mom won't let them eat anything. I thought that was really strange. Like those choices were made from a director's perspective telling the story. And I think you're right. I think if they had just had one or two more instances or something that said that what Eddie did for Danny to help build out that relationship, because Danny worships him in this middle section of the movie when we're like at the Korean War time. Eddie can do no wrong. And he is talking to a 12-year-old. And I get it. It was the 50s. It was a different time. But he's saying things like, which girl would you pick? It's
Yeah.
not the most wholesome stuff, which understandably upsets Dixie. She's like, look, you need to leave my son alone. You need to lay off. You have your own kids. And of course, Eddie's like, well, I have girls and I got nothing to tell a girl. Like, which again, it's the 50s. Yeah. But Eddie's just not, he doesn't, like they don't matter at all. But he really should have just had a son. And while that might have been a real feeling that a lot of people had, that didn't age well, right? Watching this, I was like, oh man, he is the worst.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, kind of through this next section, right? They're trying to get this TV show thing kind of going, right? This like variety kind of thing, I guess, that they're doing. And that's starting to get a little bit of a foothold, I guess. And then kind of during one of the live, recordings of this, Eddie announces that they're going to be going off to Korea, right? To go back on their USO kind of tour sort of thing that they had done before in World War II, which catches, Dixie by surprise. So she's, very quick to throw it back into his face and says that he's going to be giving some, astronomical donation then to the Red Cross, kind of a tit for tat sort of a thing. But basically, they're going to end up going to Korea, and it's so strange because like Eddie's motivation for going to Korea is so he can get Dixie alone, so they can have this illicit affair, and she ends up like bringing her in, suggesting that his wife comes, right?
So yeah, okay. So I think that was part of it for sure, because again, Eddie is very arrogant. And one of the things that I really loved is when Jeff, who's the kid who's trying to get Dixie to, go to this show, and they're having these kind of, like you say, over narration about what's happening in the past. Mm-hmm. He asks her, or, he alludes that, hey, so he tried to sleep with everything that moved. And, how did that go? And she was like, oh, no, not me. I was married. And she thought he was kind of gross. Right. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is the only time that we see him really make a pass. And he's like, come on, you want me. And she's like, I absolutely don't want you. That's gross. But I love that she stands up for herself in the only way she can in these times, right? She couldn't go out and like talk to HR and be like, he's sexually harassing me. But she could be like, oh no, your family's coming. My family's coming. We're all going to be there together. And he's real not pleased with that. So I kind of like that she stands up for herself in the best way she can in that time. And doesn't fall for his like glittery, Eddie Sparks baloney that she knows is not real. And she's the only one who really knows that it's totally not real. And I love that because she sticks around. Now her son's invested, but we can see that the cracks are happening, right? And in I think the only time we see them act like real people is in Korea when they kind of come up upon they're headed to a base, and the base has now been taken over by the Koreans. And there's a bunch of kids, literally like teenage kids, that are dying or wounded. And she has to help one of them, and she thinks that they're going to be fine, and they're not. They end up dying, and she loses,
Hmm.
she's covered in blood. And he says, "Hey, can you stay with me?" And, at first she's like, "Absolutely not." And he's like, "Not like that. It's not like that. I just don't want to be alone," which I don't know. That was very real for me. And you don't know exactly what happens. You're pretty sure that they do end up consummating that relationship, but um, he tries to say, even at the end, he's like, "That was actually really special." And she's like, "Nah, it wasn't, dude. Go. I'm gonna go to my tent. I'm gonna leave you alone." Um, but it really breaks during the Christmas time, because Art has seen all of the devastation in the Korean War, and he gets kind of accused of being a communist sympathizer. And that was like a really big deal back then. Today, you
Hmm.
can say
Hmm.
anything. You can be like, Nazis are cool. They're very fine people. And like, you can run for president. It's totally fine. But back in those days, you couldn't do that. And so Eddie is told by the sponsors that he has to fire his pal Art, which he does, like on Christmas at this party. It does
Hmm.
not go well. Dixie does not like that. She loses her temper. And it becomes this really hard dichotomy between her, Danny, and Eddie, because Danny is just this kid who lost his dad, sees Eddie as a father figure. His mom is just really mad, and he doesn't understand why. He's only 12. And that really shapes the whole last third of this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So they get home from Korea. We get a little bit of a transition, and then we're off to Vietnam, right? Danny is now a grown man, so he's off to fight in the Vietnam War, and maybe the USO tour is going to get kicked back off again. I really thought it was an odd decision in telling the story, is that Art is the one that shows up on behalf of Eddie to recruit Dixie to go back on the road to Vietnam, because like literally in the very previous scene he had gotten fired by Eddie, but now he's there on his behalf, which I thought was a little bit strange. But the duo is back off, I guess, for one last grasp at USO greatness.
Yeah. So to me, I thought that was actually that made sense. And let me tell you why. So, because at the beginning of that scene, he's like, I'm tired of being mad at Eddie. It wasn't Eddie's fault in some ways, right? Eddie could have stood up to, and that was the thing. Dixie stood up to Eddie, right? In the way she knew
Hmm.
how. Eddie tries to save it when he's firing Art. He's like, "We're going to figure something out. We're going to figure it out under the table. You're still going to be my guy." But Art, he is a constant. It's that consummate friendship that I think is not entirely healthy, because Eddie continues to walk all over people, but Art
Hmm.
still loves him and says, "Look, Eddie is terrified. He wants to come talk to you about doing this other gig." And of course, Dixie's like, "Absolutely not. I hate you." And again, it goes to how awful Eddie is, because what does Eddie have? He has the only one thing he can use as leverage, and that is her son. And says, "You want to see him, right? Like, I can make sure that we go to the base where he's at in Vietnam, and you can see your son." And she looks at him and she calls him a SOB. And I love it, because she's like, "You are the worst."
Hmm.
But she knows that she has no choice. She's going to go do it because she's going to see her son. And as a mom, I definitely probably would have done the same thing. I would have been like, "Okay, I'm going to go see my kid," right? And I do want to talk a little bit about the cinematography. You're going to laugh, because this is not a film known for its greatness in film, right? But I
Hmm.
really do like the scene where they're in the helicopter, because they do a pan out where they show the helicopter landing and like the base. And I thought that was really cool to be, because I figured most of this stuff was done on a soundstage. So I'm not sure how they did that. It looked pretty
Yeah.
neat. Um,
Yeah, it did look weird, which was kind of weird in juxtaposition then, because when they're in Northern Africa, it looked like they went into like someone's like backyard in Arizona to film it. But then the opening into Vietnam was, was pretty nice, I thought. So yeah, it's
yeah.
kind of a bit strange, I thought. But yeah, it looked pretty good going into Vietnam, and then yeah, they're going to kind of descend on this camp. Obviously, times have changed in terms of kind of the USO's, I guess, purpose, mission. I don't really know, but obviously, the soldiers' viewpoints have changed, and that becomes very, very apparent here as we're getting into the Vietnam section. But she does, get to have a little bit of a reunion with Danny there, and they talk about, Danny had been writing Eddie some letters and things, and she asked him about that, and he's like, "Well, I just wanted to tell him what would make him feel good," which was weird because the last time we saw Danny and Eddie, like he was sticking up for him like a 1,000% in Eddie's camp, and then all of a sudden now he maybe is in the error of his ways. I don't know because they don't, sort of shed any light on any of that. I don't know for sure, but we're going to get kind of one last performance by these two at this Vietnam USO show.
Yeah, and I like the way that went down because Eddie was used to being this one-line jokester that everybody loved, right? It's such a different feel than the very first time we see Eddie perform, where he can say a couple of things and a couple of quips, and the boys just love him. The boys aren't interested in anything he has to say. They want to see the girl that they brought to do a dance, because that is a thing in the 40s. And it doesn't go as well here. Like they kind of surround her and they end up having to get her off the stage because she looks pretty scared. Don't blame her because it's gross. But Dixie brings down the house yet again. She does it again, and she does it in a different way. She's changed. She cusses at them. She tells them they're sorry. They're sorry soldiers. Like she's bantering with them back and forth. They ask her to show her body, and she's like, "I would, honey, but you'd probably have a heart attack." Like, and she's like, 60. It's amazing. She sings this, in my opinion, a really sweet version of "In My Life." By the Beatles. It was the first time I'd ever heard that song. I had no idea it was a Beatles song beforehand. My bad. And I really love that. My favorite part is Eddie is brought a camera crew in. Of course, he is asking the cameras to find a shot of her son watching, and her son is nowhere to be found because he knows. And I know that that's what's missing, and I think that it would have been better if we'd seen that dynamic change a little bit, but Danny's all grown up. He has seen some horrible things with war. He has been there in a way that Eddie and Dixie never have. I mean, they saw a snippet of it in Korea, right? But he's been there. I mean, he's talking about like a kid who's 19, who his life is over because he's going to be mentally scarred absolutely forever, even if he goes home in one piece. He will never be the same, and it's awful. He's not going to give Eddie the satisfaction of having him there looking at his mom in adoration for this, for the sake of, getting viewers and making money. It's just, but all things kind of stop there because he's out on this ledge. He sees that they're starting to get firebombed. And it's really tough because everybody kind of has to take cover. A bunch of people are killed. Dixie and Eddie find shelter, but Danny is trying to get to them, and he is killed kind of right in front of them. And it's really awful.
It is, yes. This section to me, it looks pretty good in terms of like a wartime film. You see kind of like the mortars shoot off in the distance, and I thought that was really cool. This section to me, I struggled with quite a bit, to be quite honest. You had the dancer there who is being assaulted on stage, and then she ends up dying in this, which doesn't have any sort of bearing on the story. It felt very exploitative or something of that, right? She's assaulted and then dies in this thing, right? Which didn't have any bearing on the story. Didn't need to show that. Could have left it alone, with the assault on the stage to kind of set the tone for the way this is going. There is a crazy guitar shred riff that goes on through this whole thing, which is so odd.
It's so weird.
It's so weird. It's so weird. And then this artillery fire literally lasts for 6 minutes. There's 6 minutes of film of just this camp getting shelled, which is way too long. Like 30 seconds. You've gotten a point across the point that you needed to accomplish here. It goes on really, really long, and the whole time that guitar is just shredding in the back. So I guess good job to the guitar artist that was hired to come in and do that. But yeah, of course, Danny ends up dying there in this kind of sneak attack sort of thing that comes in and shells at. And of course, Dixie is sticking her head out of the tent, right at that exact moment that happens. So she sees her son die there, and she's going to go home and never forgive Eddie for doing that, right? For bringing them all there, for basically what she chalks up to getting her son killed. And over the course of this 50 or so year relationship that these two have had, the really the times where they've seen eye to eye on things have been very, very few and far between. But they are a show business couple after all. So that brings us to the current day where she is meant to be going to the celebration of Eddie Sparks.
Yeah. And it brings us back to the moment you talked about where, Jeff, the character who's there, kind of, he's like, why don't you just rest? And she goes to the bathroom or whatever, and he calls his boss, and they're like, she's supposed to be here like now. What is going on? And he's like, I don't think she's coming, dude. She just poured out her life story, and she never wants to see him again. And I don't blame him, because this could have gone down very differently if Eddie had made different choices, perhaps. But then he can't get into her room, and he thinks that she's done something horrible to herself. So he's like breaking down the door, and then she shows up in this pink, like, silk dress that looks interesting. I remember being 10, seeing it for the first time and being like, this is really beautiful. And as an adult, I'm like, that's a lot of fuchsia. It's
well, it has a giant shawl thing on it, which she takes off later, which helps, right? But
yeah, she just kind of looks like a very, very fuchsia kumquat at the beginning, very shiny. But I love it because she's like, it's Balenciaga, which of course it is. I mean, but it's got, I don't know how she put that on in the 30 seconds that he was on the phone, because it's got things like gloves. It's got this cape thing. She's got makeup on, like that to me, it was like, that doesn't make any sense. But they get in the limo. And one of the things that I love, she tells him, she says, you were right. You could fix things, because he had fixed a record player for her. And he said, my mom said that I could fix anything with my hands. And she said, you really can. And I think, really being able to talk about and sort out her feelings with somebody who had never been there would be helpful. It's kind of like a therapy session. I don't know. So they get there. She immediately wants to go see Eddie. They're about to go on stage. None of this part makes any sense to me from like a logistic standpoint at all. Like, in my mind, she has missed every cue that she needed to be on. Yes. They're like just waiting for her, and she's like, I'm going to go talk to Eddie. And then they talk for a good 10 minutes, where she basically is like, look, we did this. We both made the decision to basically kill Danny, right? Because we went, we shouldn't have gone. We shouldn't have done what we did. We did all of those things, not for the boys really, but for us. And he tells her she's crazy and he didn't do anything wrong, and he's really proud of what he did. And it's very like, just there's no closure there. He doesn't say he's sorry. She doesn't say that she forgives him. But then he goes out on stage and he kind of loses it a little bit. He starts to talk a little bit about the son that they shared, right? And how much he feels regret. And to me, as an adult, as a kid, I loved this, right? As an adult, I was like, it's not enough. Like, it just seemed like very too little too late, but apparently it's enough for Dixie. So she shows up on stage and they do a banter back and forth. And of course it's about sex at 80. Why not? I mean, they both look like they've been dead for a while.
Dixie's makeup looks rough as an old lady, but Eddie Sparks's makeup as an old man looks real rough, for sure. There, and they get up on stage. Eddie makes like the bare minimum like apology on stage, and then apparently bygones be bygones. 50 years of hatred just out the window, and they kind of, as you said, Michaela, they have their little banter, and they kind of do a little song, and then it is. I don't know. It's neat. They like close the stage, and it's like both of their faces together. But there's something really strange about like James Caan of like Eddie Sparks's like picture in it. You'll have to look at it again. Maybe I'll post it on the social medias. He has like this really like weird distant look in his eye on there. Maybe that's James Caan. Just be like, can we wrap this up, please? For the love of God, let's get this on. And that's where it ends, right? I guess they're meant to indicate that their relationship has been mended now after all of these years. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't really buy kind of their infatuation with one another, which I think was kind of a miss. I feel like that could have been drawn upon, or their reliance on each other a little bit. I guess for me, like Eddie Sparks, like seemed like he was, always willing to like be exploitative of the
Mm.
situation, but it never felt like he really like needed her to do that so much. Like that could have been a little bit more interesting of a
Hmm.
take, I thought. Yeah, I don't know, but Michaela, you'd mentioned this was one of your favorites, from childhood, and you hadn't watched it for quite a while, at least as the story you told me. But you've watched it now again, kind of with fresh eyes. What'd you think about watching, For the Boys in 2024 versus whenever the last time would have been?
I mean, I still really liked it. I mean, it's for me, it's also very nostalgic, right?
Hmm.
It's much more emotional watching it. I mean, within the first 10 minutes when she's singing to her son goodbye before she like goes and meets Eddie, I'm already a mess. I mean, we all know this about me, right? So that's probably not surprising. Um, I think that yeah, it was a bit long. Um, I didn't feel it as a kid because
A
I
bit.
watched it in like 30-minute increments. So that makes sense why it would feel long, right?
Hmm.
I do think that, and I felt this when I watched it at 10. The whole 5-minute scene of the Vietnam War piece with the guitar riff, I never understood that. I thought that was so weird, and just pointless, in a way. Didn't like that. That could have been shortened up, and it probably would have made even more of an impact.
Yep.
There were definitely parts in every film, in every story, right? There are parts that could have been teased out a little bit more to get more character development or to go a little bit deeper. This was not a super deep film by any stretch. I still really liked it. I think that the idea of doing this for the boys, doing this because you believed in what they were doing, you know, it starts that way and then it changes. It becomes for a bunch of other things. And so that's kind of an interesting dynamic, but they don't really delve into it. You have to watch it a lot, I think, to really tease that out for yourself.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know, but I mean, I love the performances. Obviously, I mean, that's a big part of what I loved about it when I was 10. And I liked the banter of them on stage. I think that on stage they do some really cool. They actually have fairly good chemistry, and it's interesting that you didn't. I really like that scene when he says he's sorry. Like he goes over the top to say he's sorry, right? Like he's singing to her and stuff, and then he asks her to dance, and he says, and he's like, "Oh, we're gonna be great," and he says the exact same thing to Art said to him, and he says, "Just follow my lead," and she's like, "Yeah, right off a cliff." And I think that moment was it for me. Like he knows that he's full of it. She knows she's full of it. She likes him. She likes him anyway for whatever reason. And that kind of carries people through. And I do think that in long friendships, I mean, gosh, I'm only 43 and I don't have very many long friendships, but I think that you kind of have to have that. And I love that they explored that a little bit. They could have done a lot more with it. I don't
Hmm.
know. So I'm kind of torn, right? This was
Yeah.
definitely the most patriotic of films because we picked this, or I picked this because it was Veterans Day, and I wanted to pick something that was not super rah rah America because I'm not feeling that way, but also like was about like from like a soldier's perspective, and I think this movie kind of got lost in that. Like I think that if it was trying to do that, it did not do that. I don't know. So as an adult, it's
Hmm.
kind of dampened it a little bit, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I never bought into their relationship, and I think there were different ways you could have done that would have made it more compelling, right? Eddie could have been super charismatic, meaning Dixie would have, literally followed him off of a cliff. Like that line is fine, but I didn't believe in any of the things that led up to it. I didn't, it never played on the fact that Dixie had this love of stardom. Like she never really seemed to care about that. So then you kind of wonder what her motivations were for any of this throughout the whole film. It's really long. It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes long, which is fine. Like if a movie is, warranted of being that long, but the problem for me then kind of at the end of it, and this movie's not terrible, like it's fine. Um, but that's the problem then. It's fine, right? Like it's pretty, bland and standard kind of this thing. It doesn't do anything that warrants that time, which then makes me mad that it's that long, right? It could have accomplished the same exact thing in like an hour and 45 minutes, an hour and 50 minutes, right? It could have treaded all the ground that it treaded in the film in that amount of time if that's all it's going to do. Now had it gone, deeper into the relationship or the building of that or into Eddie's character or into the way that her son, perceived things, that would have been good. That would have been an added layer to this. And I think that's probably why, it kind of is, pretty mid-range. Any of the reviews that you see for it, it ended up losing a ton of money. I think the budget on it was $40 million. I think it brought back in $23 million. And like I said, it felt like they sat down with a pen and paper and said, let's go win a bunch of Oscars. And they just kind of missed the mark on that, which is, something that happens from time to time. So yeah, this was the first time I'd ever seen this one. I wasn't familiar with it. I'd never even heard of it, to be quite honest, when you put it on the calendar. But it's good to watch. Bette Midler was really good in it. Her singing was great. She's quippy. Her dialogue felt very out of time for the time periods that they were trying to portray from time to time. But the highlight for me was Ari Gross, who plays Jeff, who is the kind of chaperone figure there, that young kid that came to pick her up. His performance to me was the best in the film, kind of hands down. George Segal is excellent as Art Silver. I really liked his portrayal of that, even though, it was pretty hot and cold on, kind of the dynamic that the three of those characters had from time to time. So I don't know. Any parting words on For the Boys before we head out, Michaela?
No, I think we've covered it. I mean, this is going to become as long as the movie, and that would be bad. So
we don't want that. We don't want that. But what we do want is for you to try a Purple Heart cocktail out there because it was delicious. It was luxurious. It was delicate, like a rose, for sure. So go ahead and make one of those up. You can send us pictures of your cocktail or what you thought about the film For the Boys. If you've ever heard of it, if you loved it at age 11, like Michaela, let us know all that stuff. You can do it on our social media. It's at Drink the Movies on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook.com/Drink the Movies. If you want to see the pictures of our cocktail, written recipes, links to the merchandise shop, Drink the Video Games, all that stuff, you can do that on our website, which is www.drinkthemovies.com. And you're going to want to make sure that you subscribe to the podcast because we've got 2 drops every week. So, Michaela, where can they do that?
you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere, near pods, good pods, all the places where Spotify podcasts are distributed and supported. We do 2 drops a week here at Drink the Movies. If you're liking what you're hearing, press that subscribe button. If you're really liking what you're hearing, share us on all social media stuff. There's a 5-star review you can leave talking about things you like. If you have any sort of feedback on movies that you would like us to cover or cocktails you would like us to try or anything like that, we love to hear it. We have the greatest job in the world. We can't do it without all your listenership. And if you like video games at all, even if you don't, you should go check out Drink the Video Games because it's amazing. I'm not even a huge video game person and I love it. So go give it a shot. Yes, all that.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We had our newest episode, Drink the Video Games. Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis came out last week, so you can go check that out wherever you're listening to this. So, Michaela, that's going to wrap it up here for the boys. Next week, we're going to be doing a throwback episode to, we've got a couple left from what we've recorded during the writer's strike last year. So we've got one of those coming next week for everyone. So head over to patreon.com/drinkthemovies if you want to get your vote in for what we released this week and any of the bonus content we've got going on over there. So with that, Michaela, this USO tour has come to an end. Hopefully our friendship remains after talking about this one better than Eddie's and Dixie's, or maybe as good as Eddie's and Dixie's. I don't know, however you want to take that. So with that, Michaela, thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time on
Drink
the Movies.
Oh my God, alone in the dark with thousands of men. There is a God after all. Someday I'm going to use that line in real life. It's going to be amazing.
There you go. Dixie Leonard.